Well, good morning. It's really good to be able to preach to you guys. And first and foremost, I want to make sure that everything that I'm saying to you, that I'm trying to do it with the most humility, the most humble heart, that I'm submitting this to God first before bringing it to you. And that not everything I say will be perfect, but I hope that it will be spirit-led. When I was younger in middle school, I was at a very small height, but at my peak awkwardness and confusion, as most of us are in middle school. And at that point, I was also wanting people to take me more seriously. I was at that stage in life where I thought I had something to say. People needed to hear me, and I wanted people to know what I had to say. And that was what I had grown up. I had grown up around people who I very much respected, and I appreciated what they had to say. And I was like, I can't wait for the day when I get to offer something valuable. And I was always a smaller kid, still kind of am pretty small, but even back then I was smaller. I'd always have to be a little louder, raise my hand a bit higher to be noticed in my groups, in Sunday school. And that's what I had in middle school. And you have probably had similar experiences, whether it's something you're currently living, whether it's something you lived through in middle school, or whether it's something that you live with at home. We all want to offer something valuable. We all want to do something important. But what if I told you that you could do the most valuable thing and you wouldn't have to do anything? It wouldn't cost you any amount of money. You don't even need a particular skill. You don't have to learn something in order to do this thing, but it does require something of you. It requires you to follow, because Jesus wants to make a follower out of you. The text we're reading from today is Mark 1, verses 16 through 20. You don't have to find it yourself. I'm just going to read it. It's 5 very short verses, and it's not a complicated passage. Starting in verse 16. As Jesus was going along by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net in the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." Immediately they left their nets and followed him. Going on a little farther, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who were also in the boat mending the nets. Immediately he called them. And with that they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and went away to follow him. It's not a very complicated passage. It's very simple, actually. But what events have brought us to this point in the text? Well, in Mark's gospel, he brings us to this point very simply. With only 15 verses prior, he explains John the Baptist preparing the way of the Lord, the baptism of Christ, Jesus going into the wilderness to be tempted by Satan, but he doesn't sin, and he returns, and he goes into the countryside, and he begins preaching the good news of the kingdom of God. But he doesn't have followers yet. He's now going into Galilee, and he calls on 4 very specific people: Simon, Andrew, James, and John. They're 2 pairs of siblings, and they have something in common. They're all fishermen. And the thing you need to know about this is that this is not pretty fishing. This is not your dad's Saturday morning recreational fishing where he goes with his buddies. They've got their little fishing rods, their little fishing hats with hooks in them and everything. It's nothing like that. What this is hard labor. This is their livelihood. This is something that they spend hours doing, where they spend all night casting their net into the water, big heavy nets, and they're hoisting them into the boat with hopefully fish and pulling them in, and then they sell the fish, and that's their livelihood. Another thing about fishermen, they smell. They smell like fish. Go figure. They are going to smell like fish, probably even after they bathe, because day in and day out, that is what they're around, and it's not pleasant. They're very common also. The fisherman was not a very prestigious job. It was something that was fairly common because the Sea of Galilee was very ripe for fishing. And it was something that was fairly easy to do so long as you had a boat or could work with someone who had a boat. It did require a lot of hours and it was hard labor, but it was something that everyone could do. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because that's a very common thing. These were common people, four very common people who didn't have anything special to offer. In fact, the one thing they did have to offer, their fishing skills, was of no interest to Jesus. Jesus calls to them. He says, "Come and follow me. I'll make you fishers of men." He doesn't even want them to fish for fish. He doesn't even want them for the thing that they're actually good at. He calls them to follow him, which is so weird to be calling them out of the thing that they're good at. And it's interesting that he calls such unnoticed people. You've probably had similar experiences. I know I have had this kind of experience where I walk into an event or a party or even church sometimes, and you walk in and you go pretty much under everyone's radar. Nobody's really noticing you, and you could pretty much go the whole service without being noticed, walk in and out. You could go through the whole party and not be seen by anybody, really, because they don't see you. They might look at you and see you pass by, but they don't actually see you for who you are and where you're at. And what changes is when one person notices you, not because of what you can offer them, but because of who they see you for. When it might be someone like a family member, or maybe it's your best friend, or maybe it's just someone who is being kind that day, where they noticed you and they called out to you because of not because of who you are, but because of their relationship to you. And Jesus is calling out to these four in a way that is so special that it's kind of mind-blowing. But it matters so much more because they're common. And they had nothing to offer Jesus. And sometimes in a similar way, we don't have anything to offer Jesus. Sometimes we think we do. Sometimes we think we have a special gifting or ability and that Jesus wants that. But that's not the case. What Jesus wants is to make followers out of us. Jesus wants to make a follower out of you. In the end, isn't that something that we all want? We all want to be noticed, and we all want to do something valuable. That most valuable thing, to follow him, it doesn't cost us anything of ourselves, but it might cost us everything. Jesus is calling Simon and Andrew away from their boat and from their families and from their lifestyle. He's calling James and John, he's calling them away from their father who's in the boat with them. and they leave him behind. And they're willing to do that to follow Jesus. That's something that's so incredible that they're willing to leave all that behind. And sometimes following Jesus means that you need to do the same. You might have to give up something. It might be a possession. It might be a family member. It might even be familiarity. Because even if we're not that comfortable, sometimes just the familiarity, the consistency of the same day to day, even if it's hard, even that gives us comfort. But Jesus calls them away from even that. He says, "Come, follow me," and immediately they followed. So as you leave today, I want you to remember that Jesus wants to make a follower out of you. I want you to remember that. And I want you to remember that that's the most valuable thing you can do. There's nothing else more valuable in this world or outside of this world than following Jesus. Nothing. So as you're leaving today, I want you to think also about this. What if we all started treating Jesus as if he was the most valuable thing in our lives? What if we started truly believing that he is the most valuable and that following him is the most important thing we can do?